Welcome everyone. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. To start the council meeting off, we have a public forum. To start the public forum off, I must advise the public forum is being audio recorded for administrative purposes. By speaking at the public forum, you agree to being recorded. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this public forum, that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this public forum. Just to bring you into the loop, the public forum, there are 4 speakers on different subjects, and more particularly, those speakers have 5 minutes to state their case, and after which the councillors will be given the option to ask questions. So please stick to your 5 minutes because we've got a very busy evening. So the first speaker is Mrs. Julie Garoni, and she's on Zoom. Welcome, Julie, and your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. We became aware of the developer's intentions not to build to the DA in the first week of March 2019. What happened after the first week of March 2019? The following is a timeline of the last 2 years, a brief overview. Next slide, please. 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 We have never experienced anything like this. 5 mods of consent over 2 years, 5 submissions by us objecting to the 5 mods of consent, hundreds of pages of information, hundreds of emails, thousands of hours of research, a debunked Northeast survey design dogleg survey. Next slide, please. An independent survey, the cost of hiring our town planner, review documentation, additional review documentation, submissions objecting to the review documentation and the additional review documentation, an independent reviewer, 3 council meetings. Next slide, please. The developer has had ample opportunity to address the issues created when the developer decided not to build to the original DA. We believe the community expects developers to build to a DA, and if they don't, the expectation is the developer will fix it. Next slide, please. There are repeated irregularities and omissions throughout the developer's documentation. For example, the developer repeatedly states, replacement of previously approved first floor windows, southern elevation of rear garage and studio building with highlight windows. Next slide, please. However, this omits the existence of the enclosed veranda in the original DA, the location of the windows being in an enclosed veranda, not a room in the original DA, and the location of southern elevation in the original DA being 800 millimetres, almost 1 metre further north and over 1 metre lower in height. Next slide, please. Another example is the latest retaining wall design. Design 3 presented to the council on 25th May 2020 clearly had greater granular fill and footings on our property. Design 4 in the review, no such thing. And if you look down at the bottom of that diagram, you can see the phrase typical retaining wall section. Next slide, please. We believe typical retaining wall section in design 4 pivots around encroaching greater granular fill and footings shown in design 3. The typical retaining wall section refers to the southern section of the retaining wall only, not the northern section adjacent to the studio garage, where the original fence sheeting was removed in order to build the retaining wall and where the encroachment occurs. Next slide, please. In reality, on site, the encroachment hasn't suddenly disappeared. The greater granular fill noted in design 3 is clearly observed on site, and we are confident that the encroaching footings in design 3 haven't moved. How could the footings move? Next slide, please. Yet another example is page 788 of the council agenda for 14th of December 2020. No formalised drainage. The retaining wall has been backfilled with aggregate, which will still allow drainage discharge either end of the wall. Greater granular fill is now defined as backfilled aggregate. Next slide, please. We are told that water moves through the backfilled aggregate, but isn't this just how drainage works? Water moves through a medium. Despite no formalised drainage, we conclude the backfilled aggregate is clearly for drainage and should be defined as drainage. Next slide, please. Different designs or phrases fail to alter the on-site evidence. The backfilled aggregate extends from the retaining wall to our shed. It is on our property. Next slide, please. Is it acceptable for developers to use a little bit of the neighbour's land for their development, despite the fact they had a clean slate to build on? If allowed, this will set a precedent for developers to use just a little bit of the neighbour's land for drainage, footings, aggregate, retaining wall, backfill, etc., it wouldn't pass a pub test. Next slide, please. We find it bewildering that despite the Northeast Survey Design dogleg survey being inaccurate and the on-site evidence, the recent Northeast Survey Design surveys being used to state the retaining wall is fully enclosed within the boundary. The Walpole survey, the independent surveyor, stated retaining wall is partly located over the common boundary. Next slide, please. We believe that any surveying of the retaining wall to clarify an encroachment should be conducted by an independent surveyor. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we believe the developer has had ample opportunity to remedy this situation, has not adequately addressed the issues created by not building to the original DA, and continues to submit documentation containing irregularities and omissions with pivoting around previous information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Groney. Any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Vanderven and Councillor Connor on the screen. No questions? Thank you.
No.
No. Thank you, Ms. Groney. We'll go to the next speaker, Mr. Peter O'Dwyer, also via Zoom, and he's speaking against 656 Pemberton Street. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. My original submissions to previous council meetings still stand in terms of the matter before you tonight. And rather than going over those grounds, I'd like to just briefly touch on some other relevant matters. Firstly, our initial submissions to council of 8 July 2020 in relation to the request for review still stand. That is, it's reiterated that in the first instance, council must make an initial decision as to whether it will allow the request for review. If the answer is no, that's where it ends. It's council's decision. The review decision is made. Further, despite the submissions of habitat planning in respect to this matter, it's the case that whether or not the applicant or council's independent assessor are of the opinion that the modified plans are substantially the same as approved, despite there now being 38 documented changes to the plans, it is in fact not their decision. It's council's responsibility to make that determination. There's nothing tendered by the applicant that could call into account the legal basis for council's past decision. If the consent authority that must make the decision, it's the consent authority that needs to be satisfied that the development is substantially the same. The problem for the applicant is that if it's accepted that the development is substantially or materially the same, then we would submit that by default it remains non-compliant development as it hasn't substantially changed, and it being development that was subject to enforcement orders that were referenced back in council's decision of 25 May. I note that the three matters for enforcement that were resolved by council remain outstanding. No action's been taken and they're being held pending this decision. In the event that council decides to change its determination in response to the request for review, then our more recent submissions, which reiterate past objections, continue to remain relevant in this phase of the decision making if it moves to that. So as previously stated on a number of occasions, it's the case that such modification is necessary to address not only works undertaken without approval, but also a number of significant variations to the development as constructed when compared against the original stamped plans and indeed against the construction certificate. The only matter that we would seek to just quickly provide some additional commentary is in relation to the issue of the retaining wall. And the applicant now requests that the retaining wall once again be included in the modification request, despite lengthy argument previously tendered by them that it wouldn't form part of the application. Among other justifications, the latest submissions now contend that the retaining wall is simply built to comply with condition D10 of the permit. What this latest submission seems to conveniently overlook, however, is that the retaining wall is over 6 millimetres in height and not only required DA consent, but also engineering certified plans before it was erected. No such information has been provided to date. In addition to the above, the applicant also seeks to rely upon a plan prepared by a licensed surveyor as well as works as executed plans that have been prepared on behalf of the landowner. These plans, however, were prepared, the SJE plans were prepared well over 12 months after the wall's construction. The problem with this supporting documentation is, while it seems to be apparent from the surveyor's plan that the above ground section of the retaining wall sits in a range of 0.3 to 0.12 millimetres off the property boundary, there's still no evidence provided to date that backfill and drainage is wholly within the property. Further, in the absence of either engineering certified plans prior to the construction and or the exposing of footings, etc., to verify what work has actually gone on below ground, it's difficult to understand what relevance these recent works as executed plans have, especially given that the possible areas of encroachment are actually underground. To reiterate past statements, our clients have never given consent for any encroachment that in all likelihood results from the retaining wall. And this includes, in particular, the footings and drainage backfill. Lastly, it's important to restate the legitimate concerns previously raised in relation to the building works that are not only inconsistent with the development consent, but with the construction certificate. That is, this long drawn out process is not of the making of our clients. It's the developer who lodged the application. It's the developer who then lodged different plans for certification purposes. It's the developer who then constructed the development contrary to not only the DA, but the construction certificate. And it's the developer who's now modified the plans on at least 4 or 5 occasions. Our submissions previously and tonight still stand. Our initial recommendation is the council not accept the application for review, but that if it does, that the modification is not worthy of support and that the previous grounds for enforcement should be acted upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Dwyer. Councillors, any questions for Mr. O'Dwyer?
No.
No? Thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Ron Emtage, speaking to 656 Pemberton Street, and he's supporting an alternative recommendation. Mr. Emtage, you're welcome to the mic. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillors, this development has now been held up for approximately 2 years. Despite what you might think, this whole episode started with a good intention. It started with the intention of revising the large studio windows shown in view 1 and to make them smaller and higher as per view 2 to provide effective privacy to the neighbours. A modified DA was submitted to revise these windows. Highlight windows were also framed up in the southern module, view 1. They were never meant to be completed unless approved by the modified DA submitted. The framing could be cladded over if not approved. The neighbours have consistently distorted the facts about these windows and claimed they were built without approval. In applying for a modified DA, I exposed the development to a height infraction that I was not fully aware of. Why would I apply for a DA modification and expose the development to objections if I had willfully made changes contrary to the DA requirements? The height infraction was caused by the need to step the building up to match the DA requirements and match that lane. A parapet was added to conceal some solar panels. At the 25th of May council meeting, Peter O'Dwyer devoted about half of his presentation to the fact that there was a building encroachment. There was no building encroachment then, and there is no building encroachment now. Peter O'Dwyer misled you. Titles were issued for the subdivision, including the wall, and this can be checked with your David Christie and your surveyor, Charles Franson. Mr. O'Dwyer and Julie Garoni have consistently made a great deal about the fact there were 38 building infractions. And on that basis, the development as built and proposed was not substantially the same as originally approved. Anyone involved in the building industry is aware that if a detailed survey were carried out on a building, there will be some small inconsistencies between the detailed design drawings and the approved DA drawings. Council's professional planners and the independent professional planning reviewers have taken into account the claimed 38 infractions, and they have considered most of them to be minor and inconsequential. They consider the building to be substantially the same as originally approved. If item CM 13.1 is not reviewed and overturned, then there will only be two options available to me. Pull the building down so that it does not match the lane, and or construct an apron as per view 5. Julie Groney suggested this is a good thing to do, but it's just bad drainage solution. Council engineers know that. You'll get a few situations like that around Albury, and it's a situation to be avoided. And that's why the council DA requirements was to match the lane. In summary, I request councils to review item CM 13.1 and to overturn the motion, and then move on to item CM 13.2. With respect to item CM 13.2, I request councillors to accept the recommendations of the independent planning reviewers and approve a modified development application subject to amended and additional conditions outlined in the report to council and recent correspondence on behalf of Arkville Developments Proprietary Limited. Furthermore, I don't know whether councillors are aware or not, but there has been recent ongoing correspondence to council about the conflict of interest situation with Councillor David Thurley. We have received advice from the CEO that the complaint was ruled out on a time basis.
Mr. Mayor, through Mr. Mayor.
Time's up, Mr. Emptage. I don't really believe that's relevant to this
I think it's very
discussion.
relevant.
I
The
think
determination
the
does
issue
not
of
take into
planning-
account that David Thurley
The
is
issue of
going
planning
to...
is the major consideration. Any
Well,
view of your
I'm
own
suggesting
has been
it's
dealt
only
with.
reasonable that David Thurley be excluded from voting on
That's
this
up to
motion.
Councillor Thurley to determine that. It's an individual choice. It's not
That-
up to you or anyone else in this chamber to determine
I
that.
understand that, but it's only fair and reasonable under the circumstances that he recused himself.
That's your point of view. Any questions for Mr. Emptage? Councillors?
No.
Councillor Thurley?
The lady's gone, he doesn't want to answer the question.
Okay, no questions. Thank you, Mr. Emptage. Okay, the final speaker, I believe, is Eli Deverne, and he's on Zoom, and he's speaking to item 13.7, which is the Albury City Civic Flag Display Protocol. Thanks, Eli. You have 5 minutes, mate.
Thanks, councillors, and I'll try to be brief. I just want to speak briefly about the Civic Flag Protocol, which I strongly support and believe is in keeping with the community's contemporary expectations for our civic precincts. I would also like to make an additional recommendation as Youth Mayor, as I'm here on behalf of Albury's Youth Council, who last year made the decision to display the Pride flag in the council chambers during our meetings. We did this to show our support and inclusion for Albury's LGBTQI+ community. Albury has a fantastic record of supporting our LGBTQI+ community and has made many acts, like in 2014 when council voted in favour of endorsing marriage equality and even lit up the Mama Gallery in rainbow colours. Not to mention the fantastic art exhibition in Retro Lane called Pride, which features many pieces created by young members of the Albury community who identify as LGBTQI+. The displaying of the Pride flag isn't new or unheard of here in Albury. Albury City has raised the rainbow flag in QE2 Square to mark International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia. And in 2017, during the marriage equality postal vote, the council flew the Pride flag outside of the council building. Many councils across Australia have previously flown or currently fly the rainbow flag as a symbol of support and inclusion for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer residents. They include Moreland, Geelong, Blue Mountains, Darebin, Shepparton, Parramatta, Marrickville, Woolera, to name a few. If I name them all, we'd be here all night. You know, it's been said before, and I'll say it again, that council is the level of government that is closest to the community and to people where they live. It is important that council take this simple, inexpensive action to demonstrate inclusion in our diverse society and to encourage community awareness of the homophobia and transphobia still occurring in today's society. In 2017, when council decided to fly the pride flag outside the council building, the community called it a brave thing. Well, council, you now have the opportunity to be brave again. And I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Eli. Any questions for Eli? Thanks, councillors. No? No questions? Thanks again, Eli, for your presentation, and thank you all the speakers here this evening for the speakers during the public forum, and we'll be taking everything you've said on due notice. So thanks again, and we'll now move on to the heart of our presence here, which is the general meeting. I must start first by advising welcome to tonight's council meeting for the 22nd of February 2021, and we can all stand for the opening prayer, please, and acknowledgement. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision making, protect us in the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the culture, tradition, hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, recording and webcasting of the council meeting. This council meeting has been webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declaration received by the chair and disclosure of political donations. I have one conflict of interest declaration from Councillor Graham Doxey. The nature of the conflict is a non-pecuniary, less than significant. Brief description is as I'm the president of the City of Albury RSL sub-branch, I have an interest in the outcome, and this could be considered a conflict. The item is CM 13.7 and the action is to leave the chamber. Any other conflict of interest declarations, councillors? I hasten to add that Councillor Vanderman and Councillor Connor both on Zoom this evening. Okay, Mr. Zaknich. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This advice to the council meeting relates to disclosure of political donations and requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The Act under section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of the council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific planning matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Accordingly, the provisions of section 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report, detailing planning issues to be considered. The Local Government Act section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Zaknich. Apologies, we have none. We're all accounted for. There is no Merrill minute. Action plans. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress. And 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor Gluckin.
Very happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There being no questions or debate, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Includes those on the screen. The matter is carried. Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay, we have confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday, the 8th of February. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the following recommendation. The minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, 3 February 2021 at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Yeah. Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Reports from community forums, there are none. Notice of motions or rescissions, there are none. Presentation of deputations, there are none. Reports of minutes of committee and working party. Minutes of the Crime Prevention Committee meeting held on Monday, the 30th of November. Thank you, councillors. Anyone? Councillor Gluckin.
Very happy to move that. I believe you're the representative, Mr Mayor. On your behalf, move the recommendation as a motion that the council receives and notes and accepts the minutes recommendations of the Crime Prevention Committee meeting held on Monday, 30 November 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Gluckin?
No, I'm happy to defer to yourself if you'd like to.
No, that's fine. There's nothing further. Any further questions? No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, we have no documents for sealing. 13.1 development application 10.2018.35932.3 656 Pemberton Street, refusal for modification of development consent. Thank you. Councillor Gluckin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to move not that motion. I would like to move that we receive and note the contents of the report, and B, resolve to undertake a review of council's determination of 10.2018.35932.2 as requested.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder, thanks. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I have 2 speakers against. Councillor Gluckin, would you like to open debate? Thanks.
Thank you. Very briefly, I wish that we as council would review this matter so that both the developer and the community or the near neighbours have a resolution to this matter. And I think it's important that we determine or reconfirm either approval or not for this development this evening. And so I wish us, or I believe that we should be redetermining the request or making determination on the request. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against. We have a question from Councillor Cameron. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the most appropriate member of staff, Mr Mayor, I'd like to ask 2 questions. 1, has there in fact been encroachment by the developer on the neighbour's property as has been alleged? And 2, what action has been taken in terms of remedial measures, and have those measures been met?
Mr Christie, thank you.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. So as indicated before, there is dispute between the 2 parties as to whether there has been an encroachment. The main dispute pertains to what is occurring below the ground versus where it may be located on there. There had been some conditions recommended by the independent consultant for that issue to be resolved prior to the next steps in this process, but for conditional consent to be granted as the recommendation. And if I could just grab the second question again, if I could. Thanks, Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, were there remedial actions required to be taken by council? It was my memory that there were. And has that been done?
Again, and thank you for the question and for the reminder of that. Regards to the question for you, Mr Mayor. So the site is subject to a stop work order at the moment, which allows no work to occur on site. Council's previous resolution from 25th of May 2020 was that after Council refused to grant the modification that there were to be some follow-up actions, but has been indicated because the review has been lodged, those actions have been put in abeyance because should Council change its decision and grant consent, and some of those actions may not necessarily be appropriate to follow through in their entirety. So the stop work order still currently exists over the site, requiring no further development to occur on the site till the matter is resolved.
Small supplementary, Mr Mayor, if I may. Yes. Through you once again to the most appropriate member of staff. If tonight's decision, if this motion is lost and tonight's decision is not to review the application, then will those measures that are being held in abeyance be enacted?
Thank you for the question, and for you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we would then go on and enact those further measures.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can I just
No,
you
Mr
can't.
Tempich. Thank you. Councillor Salisbury speaking against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also will be very brief. I don't think that this matter needs to be reviewed. It's been reviewed already a couple of times with the same outcome. This DA has got multiple things wrong with it, and some of them appear to be egregious, at least on the initial inspection. So I think that the matter should be left to the here and now. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no speakers for. I have another speaker against. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've seen no evidence or arguments tonight that would lead me to conclude that we should change our position and further review this matter. I foreshadow that if this motion of Councillor Gluckins is lost, that I'll move a motion to the contrary that Council not review this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. There appears to be no further speakers for or against, so I'll send it to Councillor Gluckin to close debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a simple motion that allows us to determine one way or other tonight, and that may be to permit the development, or it could be to confirm that the development should not be approved. And I ask councillors to consider the opportunity that we have tonight to resolve this one way or the other with a subsequent motion, should this motion, as I've put forward tonight, that we resolve to undertake a review of the determination as previously made. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. There are no further speakers for or against. I'm happy to put the motion by division. Those for the motion, raise a hand, please. Councillor Doxey, Councillor King, Councillor Mack, Councillor Gluckin, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vanderven. Those against, Councillor Salisbury, Councillor Cameron and Councillor Con. The motion is carried. So the motion is to review, which brings us into 13.2.
Can you turn my light off, please?
We're into, 13.2. Okay. Councillor Gluckin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move a recommendation that is different to that is on the board at the moment. I wish to move that Council A receives and notes the contents of the report, and B reaffirms the previous determination of Council at its meeting on 25 May 2020, being that Council declines to modify development consent number 10.2018.35932.1 for your dual occupancy development, 1 additional residence, garage and studio, 2 lots, Torrens title subdivision, boundary adjustment and consolidation of lots 1 and 2, DP 726722, and lot 1, DP 16443, for the following reasons. 1, the development as constructed is not substantially the same as the development approved by development consent 10.20183593.2.1 and is therefore contrary to the provisions of section 4.55 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. 2, the development as constructed detrimentally impacts the amenity of the neighbouring property to the west and is therefore contrary to the provision of section 4.151B of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, and the non-compliances with the development consent and approval plans are significant, and approval of such non-compliances would undermine the confidence of the community in the planning process, which is contrary to the provisions of section 4.151E of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979.
Thank you, Councillor Glycan. Councillor Doxey.
Just a second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glycan, do you wish to speak to your motion? Thanks.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and thank you. I have often said in this chamber that I believe the developer who owns land has the right to develop the land largely as they wish. They do have rights. But I also acknowledge that the near neighbours and the community also have rights. And whilst it's been explained to us that this whole process that we're going through now started with good intentions to alter a couple of windows, that was we were asked to accept, was with a view to alleviating overlooking to the neighbour, to make it better for the neighbour. But with some 30 plus deviations, and some of which may be small or minor, not all of which are small or minor. And when you look at the sum total of those 30 plus deviations, the totality of them is significant. Planning policies and processes within a community are there for a number of very good reasons. They're there to enable developers to undertake good work. They're there to enable developers to largely have what they want to develop. But it's also there to protect the community and to protect neighbours, because we all need to live in our community. The planning policies and processes are there to ensure fairness, and the responsibility of council, and often delegated to the staff, is to ensure that we make the best developments to suit the developer and the near neighbours and the community, and with a number of specific requirements, for example, plumbing, sewerage, electricity, services, etc. But in essence, it's to ensure that we get the best developments for our community and to ensure that we have appropriate opportunities for people to put forward their case as we go forward. Unfortunately, this development has got to the stage where it is not as it was originally agreed with council, and it is detrimental to the near neighbours. And so I believe that we, as time has passed, should reconfirm as a council that the development is substantially different and that we should not allow a development application to modify the development as partly built to be approved. So therefore, I'm asking councillors to reaffirm our previous determination to not grant consent to the development modifications as were put to us. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glycan. Any further debate or questions, councillors? No? Okay. Councillor Glycan, there are no further speakers. Did you wish to close debate?
Very briefly, I am very conscious of the fact that it will now be somewhat irretrievable to have a good working relationship between a number of neighbours. And that's based on a protracted experience, negative experience on both parts. I, however, still believe that the reality is that we should be not allowing this development. And whilst one party will believe that they have, if we do vote as this motion is crafted, will be somewhat aggrieved with council. The outcome is that no one has won from this situation, because there will be ill feeling, there'll be significant loss to all parties, and there has been significant work done by both parties, or a number of parties, as we've progressed to this. So I'm conscious of the fact that this is not a good outcome for really anyone other than the community, because it continues to set the standard for the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Okay, councillors, happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Stuttery, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Con and Councillor Vanderin. Those against? Councillor King. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, development application 10.2020.37947.1 Childcare Centre at Diamond Drive, Thurgoona. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A receives the contents of this report, and B grants consent to development application 10.2020.37947.1 for a centre-based childcare facility on land situated at lot 506 in DP 1268791, addressed as 66 Diamond Drive, Thurgoona, subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination included as attachment 4 to this report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Very happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that? Thanks.
Councillor Vanderin has a question. I'm happy to take that.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderin, question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to relevant member of staff. I noticed that this is a 100-place childcare centre. I just wonder what the calculations are around the parking that needs to be provided, and obviously as the staff are recommending consent, obviously those parking requirements are met, but I'd like to understand what those parking requirements are in terms of staff and for the users of this centre.
Thank you. Mr. Christie.
Yep, thank you for the question. Now I'll just get into that relevant section of the report. Thank you for forbearance there, councillors. It's in the attachment of the assessment report, and I understand it's a big agenda. A childcare centre requirements is 1 per employee plus 1 per 10 children, plus a set down and pick up area. There are a total of 29 car spaces on site, including 1 disabled, with the requirement for 100 children and 17 staff. Then that satisfies those requirements. That includes 2 setting down spaces instead of 1. Thank you, councillors.
Councillor Vanderin.
Thank you. I've got a thumbs up.
Yeah, you're off the screen now. You've got your thumb on the outside of the black. I'll bring it in front of you. I couldn't see it.
My apologies.
Okay, Councillor Thurley.
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, it's great to see high quality childcare facilities. We are constantly talking about working women and their contribution to the economy. If we want this sort of stuff to continue, then we need to provide high quality childcare. I could go on and talk about the costs of it, but at the moment, at least we're providing a great facility, and I commend this.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There is a speaker for, no speakers against. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Thurley. I think this is long overdue for the Thurgoona area. There are 2 other attempts for childcare centres out there, and it doesn't appear that either of those 2 have got off the ground yet. Good to see this one make a start. It's in a good location. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. No more speakers for or against, and no questions. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour, Councillor Stuttery, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor King, Councillor Mack, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Vanderman and Councillor Con. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.5, supply of cleaning services, city area contract number 20/02007. James Bond. Missed one, did I? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll go to that one then. Oh, absolutely. Jumped that one. It's pretty important. 13.4, development application 10.20.20.380.80.1, internal alterations to the Regent Cinema at 460 Dean Street. Thank you, Councillor Glacken. No, Councillor Vanderman had his board up.
You obviously saw it this time. Thanks. Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendations and motions of Council A receives the contents of this report and B grants development consent to development application 10.2020.38080.1 lodged 4 December 2020 for internal alterations to the Regent's Theatre at 460 Dean Street, Albury, subject to conditions contained in the draft determination included attachment 4 to this report.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No. Great that there's a bit of money being spent in internal upgrades to this particular facility. It's a great facility for Albury and does a lot for our community.
Thank you. Any further question or debate, councillors? Just one from me in relation to this development. It's heartening to see that post-COVID that the Regent Cinema have done a number of renovations to all of their cinemas. And I think with this one, collectively, we're up around $6 million in total. So it gives us confidence moving post-COVID into this space that regional Australia is certainly alive and well. And if a third generation family businessman is investing that sort of money into Albury, it's a very good sign for our post-recovery. So I encourage us all to vote for this particular development application. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to close debate?
No, he doesn't.
No, Councillor Vanderman, that's right.
Correct.
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Stuttery, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor King, Councillor Mack, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Con, and have you got yours up there, Councillor Vanderman? Councillor Vanderman, the motion is carried. Thank you. Now we'll go on to 13.5, which is supply of cleaning services city area contract number 20/02007. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that council accepts the tender from Sunrise CFM for the schedule of rates contract number 20/02007 for supply of cleaning services for the city area for a 3-year cleaning period, 1 April 2021, for the estimated contract value of $347,745, including GST.
I think the figure is 434.
Oh, what did I read? I do apologise. I'll make that correction for the value of $434,745, including GST. Thank you.
You would have given them discount.
I do apologise.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak? I have a question first. If you'd like me to take the question.
Certainly take the question. Yeah.
Councillor Cameron.
Through you to the most appropriate member of staff, Mr Mayor. In letting these contracts, do we specify any arrangements to be assured that the employees of these contractors are being paid at least the award minimum rates? This is an area which is notorious for, and I'm not accusing this particular company of any impropriety, but it is an industry which does see exploitation of NESB and often working poor people. And I'd like to know what steps council takes to make sure that when, as the principal contractor, we're not incurring a liability.
Mr. Zachnich.
Thanks for the question through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, specifically the steps we take are a condition of contract to be awarded, and then at each and every claim for payment, certification that provisions around the industrial relations provisions are complied with. So we seek that statutory declaration at every payment arrangement and part of the contract provisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from Councillor King before we open debate.
Just a quick question in regards to our local procurement policy. I'm trying to find in the notes where the company from Thaguna received the weighting for it being a local provider as opposed to the recommended company who are from Epping.
So did you want to find that item or did you wish to?
Local benefit. Yeah, hang on, there it is.
So through you,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So how would someone from Epping get 6% of our local procurement if they're not from here?
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they're the current contractors and they'd be maintaining their current staff in that employment.
Local employment. Okay.
Local employment, and they've been in this region for 10 years as well.
So the head office is in Epping, is it?
Head office is in Epping, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to open debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to draw councillors' attention to the fact that the Sunrise CFM were not the cheapest tender. They were the fourth least expensive tender, and which should give us some confidence that the staff will be paid appropriately. And the other thing to note is that there is an increase from the previous contract by the same tenderer in cost. And it is important to note, of course, that the people doing the cleaning will be part of our local community and are already, if we award this tender to Sunrise CFM, already a part of our local community. Whilst it's important to have a factor in there for local content, the cleaners or the people undertaking the work in our facilities will, of course, be part of our local community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Any other further questions or debate, councillors? No, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. All in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Now we're up to the 13.6, the December quarter budget review. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vanderman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that the motion that Council receives and adopts the revised budget estimates for the 2021 financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. You have the floor. Do you wish to open debate?
No, thanks. I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions or debate, councillors? There are no questions or debate. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to close debate?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? All in favour, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.7, let the records show that Councillor Doxey is leaving the chamber. Thank you, Mr. Hannon. The chamber is sealed. Thank you very much. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council A, receives and notes submissions in response to the public exhibition of the Albury City Civic Flag Display Protocol. B, adopts the Albury City Civic Flag Display Protocol. C, approves the installation of the Australian national flag, New South Wales state flag, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander official flag, and the Albury City ensign on a repurposed banner poles at the Albury City Administration building, and retains the individual pole displaying the Australian national flag for the purposes of acknowledging state and national commemorations as they occur. D, provides opportunity for further community and stakeholder feedback in relation to the installation of additional flagpoles at the World War I memorial site through the exhibition of draft 2021/22 one-year operational plan. And E, receives a further report in relation to the permanent display of the Pride Ensign in council chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, no questions at this point. Do you wish to open debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is this subject has been has attracted quite a bit of controversy, and mainly because of a previous motion which was adopted on the 15th of December, which was item 13.5, CM 13.5. And in that was the result of an amendment moved by Councillor Con, which, in my view, rendered the motion very difficult and in fact unworkable. And I'll explain, if I may, why that is. I'll just have to scroll back in the report to find the actual text of the previous motion. I'm still experiencing all sorts of interesting things with the... So the motion as adopted in CM 13.5 on the 15th of December was that Council A endorsed the Albury draft Albury City flag display protocol, which was the purpose of the agenda item. Publicly exhibit the Albury Civic flag display protocol for a minimum of 28 days, etc. C, and this is the part that was modified, include the draft one-year operational plan funding for the installation of 2 additional flag poles at the Albury City Administration Building to enable the display of the official Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag alongside the Australian national flag, and then through a amendment or a motion proposed by Councillor Con, and 2 additional flag poles at the World War I memorial site to enable the display of the official Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag alongside existing national flags. Now, it's my contention that although that was adopted by Council on the night, it's my contention that that is at odds with E, which was also adopted by Council on the night, which says, requests that any proposed changes in regards to display of flags at the World War I memorial site are made in consultation with Albury City RSL sub-branch and in line with its protocols. That is, in my view, the correct way to proceed around this question. And it would have been better if C had not been adopted by Council in December. And I believe it's at odds. I believe it's contrary. I think it's arguably out of order. And I will be in the next week proposing a rescission motion to the extent necessary to remove that second part of C that was adopted back in December. But that's not tonight's business. Tonight's business is the endorsing of the flag protocol overall and the recent consultation around that. So that's as much as I have to say on the subject at this point, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron, for your clarification. Councillor Thurley speaking for, no speakers against.
Yes, I speak for the motion, and as Councillor Cameron has just tried to do, to clear up the confusion and perhaps the histrionics that have occurred. This is simply seeking people's views on whether, first of all, the number of bits, other parts of the motion, but secondly, the issue of a budget allocation for 2 additional flagpoles. That will be made, and the public will have the opportunity once again to comment on what they see. Do they want 2 additional flagpoles at the War Memorial? So at the moment, this is a fairly procedural matter. We're adopting a flag protocol, which is a procedure or regulation or whatever process adopted by the federal government and accepted by RSL clubs across Australia. They accept the national flag, the flag protocols, and that's all we're doing. I haven't served my country in uniform, but I have a right to have an opinion about this matter. And I don't think we're asking anything other than people to consider this matter and give us their feedback. I don't want to denigrate servicemen and women who served our country. I didn't. I have plenty of relatives who did. But this is just a procedural matter we've got here, and we need to put it out on display. We've already got quite a bit of feedback, and I'm sure we'll get plenty more. Isn't that what council's about? Councillors have the right to move things, whether you like it or not, and we get feedback. And if the feedback is strongly opposed to what's being suggested, then probably councillors will vote in accordance with that feedback. We're not bound to, of course, but then you take the risk, you take it on board. I'm going to stand for council again and say, And, well, I'm not going to vote for you because of you did that. It's something that's going out on public display. I would hope that people would give us significant feedback, and I would hope that council will listen carefully to the feedback and make the appropriate decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Vanderman, you had a question. in your-
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity, but I have changed my mind over that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further debates or questions, councillors? Councillor Con wishing to speak for. We have no one speaking against. Thank you, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak for the motion, which I do support as is. I think it would be remiss of me not to respond to some of the comments that have been made both in the media and throughout the submissions on this, which really disappointingly and honestly deplorably attacked the person that moved the motion rather than the substance of the motion. And I think that's a disappointing standard for us to be setting for public debate as elected representatives in this community. In response to Councillor Cameron, the motion as amended by myself that we moved had support from majority of councillors, including myself, to include the provision of additional flagpoles in our draft budget, which, as Councillor Thurley has stated, does go out for public comment again. And I don't believe it's at odds with Part E for two reasons. Firstly, at the time the motion was moved, I actually clarified with the CEO that the policy of the RSL New South Wales is that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags actually must be flown during official ceremonies, and I endeavoured to check that on the night. It appears through the public submission process that the local RSL sub-branch is in disagreement with their state body, which is something that I didn't anticipate. But I think it's important to note that Monument Hill belongs to the community of Albury as managed by us as Albury City. It's not owned by the RSL, but of course they are a key stakeholder and they should be consulted with, but they don't make the ultimate decision. We do, as the elected representatives of the community. And on those grounds, I don't think there's anything at odds with what we agreed, which is to continue to consult with the RSL. That doesn't mean that we would abide by their submission as the singular stakeholder in this, as indeed we received submissions from a broad cross-section of the community that had a variety of views. And some of those submissions were appropriate, and I have taken them into account. I absolutely maintain my view that it's appropriate for us to be flying the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags at Monument Hill. The reality for returned Aboriginal service people in this region is really, really dire, and I would encourage anyone listening to this debate to watch the documentary Then He Came Home, which was made locally by Nomad Films. Aboriginal service people fought not even as citizens. They were not given medals, they were not given land parcels on return home, and some of those people died without ever having their service acknowledged. I think flying the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags at our war monument is a very appropriate way to honour that service. I think it is also in keeping with history because there's been a lot of comments that comment that everyone fought under one flag. I'd reiterate that Aboriginal service people weren't citizens of the country they fought for. And also that the current Australian flag didn't become the official ensign of all of the Australian armed services until 1954 under Menzies. A large number of the Anzacs fought under either the Red Ensign or the Union Jack, which we don't insist on flying at Monument Hill for historical accuracy. We accept that this is a symbolic location where we acknowledge symbolically not just the official national flag, but the New Zealand flag because of the contribution of the New Zealanders. It's also an appropriate place to fly the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags as per national protocol, as per the protocol that we're about to adopt, given that the War Memorial is a prominent civic site. Finally, I wanted to respond to the submission from the Youth Council and congratulate Youth Mayor Eli Davin for engaging with us on this protocol matter. I'm really pleased to see Part E in this recommendation tonight. I think it's a worthy idea that's worth us receiving a report on to consider further. The Pride flag is a really, really important symbolic flag that's recognised nationally and internationally and has really significant meaning to the LGBTQIA+ community, and I'd love to see us adopt some kind of protocol for flying that flag, noting that it's not a part of the official national flag protocol, but perhaps similarly to other councils that for example, fly the pride flag during the period of Mardi Gras, which is taking place at the moment and is well known as an important symbolic time to celebrate and include diversity in our community. So I look forward to receiving that further report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Con. There are no further speakers for or against. Councillor Cameron, to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make my position very clear on this. Apart from the fact that it will be a cold day in hell when I need a history on this country's military history from a member of the New South Wales Greens, I want to remove any confusion about my position on this, because it can, for the general public, it can be a very confusing issue. I support fully flying the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag at the appropriate buildings and facilities of council, predominantly here at the main administration building. I support that 100%. The War Memorial was not constructed by Albury City Council or the town of Albury, its predecessor. The War Memorial was constructed by a community of returned servicemen and women. They fundraised and they worked very hard to commemorate the service and sacrifice of the First World War, and then subsequently other engagements and other campaigns. It has passed into the administration and the care stewardship of the Albury City, and that is exactly what we are. We are the caretakers and the stewards of that facility. It's not in the sense our facility, in the way that, for example, this administration building or some of our other possessions around Albury are. It is well and good that we develop our policies for our buildings and our things, but as this flag display protocol suggests and mandates, any display of flags needs to be the subject of consultation with the stakeholders. And that's the key thing here. This is the second time round that Councillor Con has had a go at telling the Albury RSL sub-branch what they should do and what's good for them, and trying to template her ideas onto them. The first was a dispute over what she perceived was their need to, that they should have a welcome to country as part of the Anzac Day ceremony. And now we're seeing it backed up again for round two. It's ugly and it needs to stop. It's not the role of councillors to try and template their individual ideas and ideologies onto third parties and stakeholders here in this city, like the RSL, particularly one as August as the Albury sub-branch of the Returned Servicemen League. This matter has attracted some recrimination and some ugly debate, and I'm afraid that it will attract more if we continue on this trajectory. The best thing to do is to support a rescission motion to the extent necessary to remove the amended motion of 13.5 on the 15th of December last year, get rid of that, and then go forward in the way envisioned in the policy and protocol that we're adopting tonight. Follow our own protocol, and above all, let's proceed with consultation and respect for the stakeholders in our community, all of the stakeholders. I will support, and I expect to see the day when the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags are flown at the Albury War Memorial. But I will never support it, and I won't attempt to progress it until the Albury City RSL sub-branch tells me that that's what they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. I'm now going to move the motion for the Albury City Civic Flag Display Protocol. All those in favour? That is unanimous. The motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor. If we can invite Councillor Doxey back into the chamber, please. Just go to the bathroom. that anyone wants to join us. Yeah, okay. Councillor Vanderman, happy to move on. Councillor Doxy and Councillor Cameron are having a toilet break. Have a quorum. Councillor Vanderman.
Yes,
In
thanks,
relation
Mr.
to
Mayor.
investment balances, CM
Yeah.
14.1.
Yes, move that council receives and notes the investment balances report for the month of January 2021.
Thank you. Seconder, thanks, Councillor Stutchbury.
Never been happier to second a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that?
Not after that, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous of those that are present. Thank you, councillors. The record reflect that Councillor Doxy has returned to the chamber. Okay, 14.2 Corporate Health Indicators, December 2020. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council receives and note the December 2020 Corporate Health Indicators Report.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Briefly, I'll get onto my pet subject, and that's the lost time injury frequency rate, which you'll all know has dropped significantly, and that's a big plus for the staff and for this council. It has a financial benefit in workers' compensation premiums, but what mostly it means is that our staff are coming to work and going home accident-free, injury-free, and we've struggled ever since I've been on council. This number has been up around 10 for most of that time, and this is a brilliant result, and I commend the staff for the work they've done to achieve this.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Any further questions or debate? Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously for all those people present. Okay, 14.3, which is the operational plan quarterly progress report. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to move the council receives and notes the Albury City operational plan quarterly progress update December 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Doxy.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Look, just a little concerning is the fact that we've got not quite 50% done. Can we just get a brief overview of the main reason why, please?
Thank you. Mr. Millett, is that to you for discussion? Justin.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, I don't have one single answer. As you know, council does many and varied things, as was reflected in our operational plan. Some obviously are the impacts of COVID. Others are with, as you can see through other reports, the timing of projects and the design of projects. Others are changes of resources internally within the organisation. But there's no one thing that I can put my finger on that is causing all variations. But obviously with the overall result, we're looking to further progress that during the remainder of the financial year.
Thank you, Mr. Finlayson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Just a question from the chair in relation to Keene Street, Mr. Millett. I raised it this morning with the CEO, but it is in the December review as being designed, and we're hopeful that it will go out to tender in April, May. Is that correct?
Through years to me, it's currently out.
Okay.
So, and that will come to council once the tender has been assessed.
And it is anticipated that there will be some issues with the with that particular surface, given the proximity of the old waste facility.
To you, Mr. Mayor. So the designs will incorporate the pavement designs for that consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Glacken, you wish to speak for the motion?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor. I do note that it's approximately 42% complete, and we're looking at the 6 months in for this financial year. The reality is, noting all of the circumstances that have surrounded the last 12 months, the knock-on effect of moving projects from 2019, 2020 through to 2021, plus COVID and all the other associated impacts, I think 42% we should acknowledge, or I acknowledge, as an achievement. It's disappointing that we're not at 50%. It's disappointing that there are some design issues. It's disappointing that some of the works haven't been able to be undertaken for a number of reasons, including the fact that people who were to come and be involved in part of that design phase were not able to be physically present in our city because of the closure of the Victorian border for such a protracted period. So there's a number of significant factors, but I acknowledge that 42% based on all of that background is something that we should acknowledge as a positive way forward, because it could have been a lot worse. And I think our staff have worked hard to ensure that it is at least 42%. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. No further speakers for or against. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to close debate?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Okay, we're up to 14.4, the service efficiency and review. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council receives and notes the Albury City Service Efficiency Review Program progress update.
Thank you. Councillor Gluckin.
Happy to second that.
Councillor Thurley, just open debate.
Just briefly to say there are some very good positive signs in this report for how this council is performing. Nothing else.
Thank you. There appears to be no further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Okay. We up to 14.5, the Works Program Status Report, December quarter. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to move the council receives and notes the status of the 2021 Works Program as at the 31st of December 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or debate? It doesn't appear to be. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.6, the Infrastructure Contributions Plan Annual Report 2019-2020. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to move that council receives and notes the contents of this report on 2019/20 infrastructure contributions.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cameron, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No further questions or debate. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.7, the Monthly Development Statistics, December 2020. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to move that council receives and notes the information of Monthly Development Statistics Report for December 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that?
Look, just to note that those numbers are enormous and obviously reflects to some extent the money that was on the table from the federal government in terms of commencement of buildings. I think there was a $25,000 grant available for people, but on the basis of that, our sort of development numbers over a long period of time have been relatively stable around the $200 million per annum mark. To see a monthly total of 52 million and preempting the next report, a monthly total of 32 million, I think is huge. And I think our staff deserve our thanks and congratulations in processing and dealing with that level of activity in a very professional and relatively timely manner. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Are there any further speakers for or against or questions? There appears to be none. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Monthly development statistics for January 2021. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vanderman.
Seeing I'm on a roll, the council receives and notes the information in the monthly development statistics report for January 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Whilst you're on that roll, Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to open debate on that item?
No, thanks. I did make some comments in the previous item about this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further debate or questions. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We're up to delegates' reports for noting. There are none. And do we have any notice of urgent business, councillors? I've not been made aware of any. Okay, well, we have one confidential item tonight, and it's the CEO employment contract. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that council moves into confidential to discuss item CM 17.1, as this is a confidential item exclusive of press or public on the grounds that the matters relate to the matters and information are the following: A, personnel matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors, Local Government Act 1993, number 30, section 10A, 2A.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Glacken.
Yeah, happy to second that.
Thank you. I must ask, are there any statements or submissions from the public regarding the reasons as identified for this confidential item in 17.1? There appear to be none. We need to clear the chamber. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. I'll just wait for the chamber to be cleared and the door closed. Thank you.